All right, welcome everyone. Tonight for our Discovery Cafe, we're going to be talking about attending and presenting at a conference, and we will feature some and highlight information associated with the upcoming Undergraduate Research Scholarship and Creative Activities Conference that's held at UC Davis every year. And so this will be a nice opportunity for you to learn about some of the general formatting and also specific details for our own conference.
Recording.
Yeah, and if you're joining now, go ahead and mute yourself because we are recording. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and first let you know that there are various benefits to attending and presenting at conferences, and this applies to the Undergraduate Research Conference at UC Davis, the American Chemical Society Conference, neurobiology conferences, SACNAS. There's a variety of conferences that you can attend as an undergraduate and in the future as a graduate student. So in general, simply by preparing and practicing a research presentation, you're already building skills. So technically, just by preparing for a conference, you're going to have a huge benefit. Once you're at a conference, you are going to practice and develop those communication skills. And this includes public speaking skills as well as the networking skills. So informal skills like answering questions or asking someone else about their research. So it is important. Oh, sorry, it's auto timed, I think. It's important to realize that by presenting, you're practicing your communication skills, but by asking other people questions as an attendee, you're also having a huge benefit. Simply by presenting at a conference, you're also basically adding a line item to your CV and resume. It shows that you've been proactive to pursue opportunities. For many fellowships, they look to see if students are going out to present their research. So this can be really important. You're also going to get great feedback and insight about your research from other researchers, faculty, students, and this is just a great opportunity to think more deeply about your project. It is also a fabulous opportunity to showcase your research. So it really is something to celebrate when you're involved with research. And this is a more scholarly setting. And so it's almost like a party about research because everyone is there to celebrate the research that is being shown off. And then again, the skill building and resume building is always valuable. And it is an outstanding experience to highlight when you interview, when you apply for jobs and internships. Now, one thing you might be asking yourself, is it really still worth it to attend a virtual conference, right? So virtual conferences have many of the same benefits as the traditional formats of conferences, especially now early on in the pandemic. Some of the virtual conferences were a little rocky and the tech was still being developed, but now we have a lot of just going to keep advancing. We have a lot of opportunities for different softwares and different platforms where you can still have the same benefit of a virtual conference as an in-person conference. In-person conferences are still fun and recreate a professional experience, but it is really valuable still to attend those virtual conferences. Specifically for many of these conferences, including the Undergraduate Research Center, faculty, staff, presenters, and also attendees can log in, give feedback, and participate in online Q&A. So some of the advantages of virtual conferences is that interaction and that online Q&A can happen at midnight or it can happen, at 5 p.m. So it doesn't necessarily have to happen during the 1 hour of time in which you are presenting your work. Specific to the Undergraduate Research Conference, we have the opportunity to think about student presenters and student attendees participating, and we actually have an award. So you can compete for awards to be a conference VIP, and this is a very important participant, and I'll give you a little more information about that. So online conferences also have some fun opportunities, and this year we're planning a scavenger hunt as well. All right, so the purpose of our conference is actually to provide an opportunity for UC Davis undergraduate scholars to present their research, scholarship, and creative activities in an affirming and transformative environment. So some conferences are more, broad in terms of really focusing on the research topic. In our case, at the conference at the University of California, Davis, we're really thinking about not only sharing the research, but also kind of building the skills and affirming the environment in a positive way. So it also makes it very fun. And I'll give you a little more information, but for that conference, our conference coming up is April 28th to May 1st. All right, so a brief history about our conference. So I am going to highlight our conference for a minute, and then I'll be able to answer other questions about other conferences if you have those as well. So the history of our conference is pretty impressive. Our conference at UC Davis has now been going on for over 30 years. So the conference was first established in 1990, and that was with only 19 student presenters. In 2019, we had more than 700 student presenters representing all colleges and more than 85 majors. The 2020 conference was the first ever virtual conference due to the campus response to the coronavirus. So this is kind of what it used to look like, people crowding into a big room. Some of you may have attended before. So in 2019, we had more than 700 presenters. We had arts and designs exhibits. I'll show a few examples of that. We had research sponsors, moderators, and almost 7,000 attendees, including friends, family, colleagues, peers, staff, various community members. And you can check out examples of research projects by going to the abstract books that we have online for the past, 8 to 10 years of conferences. So this is kind of a traditional conference where people show posters and crowd around, and it's for a limited time, and it's a very high energy, but it does require that you are able to see things in a short period of time. So online does have that advantage of spreading it out. So I'll be telling you a little bit more, but I'm going to, on each slide, kind of pop up the potential schedule details for our conference this year as well. Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. Do you have a question? All right. If anyone has a question, let me know. If not, please mute yourself if you don't have a question. All right, so one of the things we also have at our conference is creative art composition. So a lot of times people think of science conferences, but we also have the opportunity to display design projects and art projects. And so these are just some exhibits and pictures from previous conferences. So that's one of the things about our conference. Our conference actually does have several aspects, a broad array of topics. So it's not just one area, but all areas of research represented at UC Davis. And just as a little shout out, here's a quote from a former presenter who describes specifically how the skills she developed at the conference were invaluable to attend other professional conferences and also to succeed in the future. So they are valuable communication skills and critical analysis skills related to your research. So in 2020, our conference then switched to the virtual or online platform in response to the coronavirus pandemic. So it was our first ever virtual conference. And that's actually what's going to be the conference this year. And this is a model that other conferences have also used. So we're also highlighting it so you can think about our conference as well as other conferences you might attend. So originally for 2020, we had 900 abstracts submitted for the in-person conference. And then we did a survey before organizing an online conference to make sure that students didn't feel overburdened and if they were still excited about presenting. And over 500 individual and group presentations took place at the virtual conference based on the response from students who said they were still excited to present their research. We had 65 majors represented. We had more than 200 research sponsors and 100 moderators and over 1,000 attendees online. And so this used a GoReact platform, and I have a picture of this down here, where students would pre-record videos to post. So they could either use a poster format, they could do spoken word, they could do a PowerPoint presentation, they could have photos and videos related to other content or projects. And then what you'll see here is a nice option off to the side where it has these interactive opportunities to post questions, to have answers, to have other people see the question and say, oh, that's a great question. I wanted to know the same thing, as well as these fun little element buttons to kind of give kudos and talk about the success of the research. So we found this to be an excellent opportunity to showcase the research and provide an interactive Q&A experience over, an extended period of time so that people could pop back in and leave questions or answers over a 2 to 3 day period. So we'll be using that same conference this year. So this year, the conference is April 28th to May 1st. We're using GoReact.com again. And this provides us with a lot of those features that we like that mimic the in-person experience. We are using this format. There are other formats that are used for other conferences, such as the American Chemical Society, different neuroscience conferences, physics, psychology. So everyone has kind of their different interactive platform, and this is one that we really like. And so in this case, all presenters will make a video presentation and post it. And usually the poster presentation or the oral presentations are around 5 to 10 minutes. And the max time is set so that they kind of, you can have a chance to see as many presentations as possible. And we will have a lot of guidelines and other details, but right now this is really more to inspire you to want to apply to attend this conference, present at this conference or other conferences. All right, so if you are hopefully considering applying for this conference, the priority registration is Tuesday, February 9th. The final registration is Tuesday, February 16th. The deadlines are by midnight on each of those days. The priority registration deadline is softer because there's still a week after that. So in order to submit, you typically write an abstract, and we have a recorded Discovery Cafe about writing an abstract that you can refer to. Writing that abstract already is great practice and professional skills. And then of course, going that next step to present your research and visit the other posters and presentations of students are important. So it turns out we have a contest to help promote this. So I mentioned it earlier. We have the what we call VIP awards. Instead of being a very important person, this is a very important participant. So it's an award and raffle for students who attend the conference and participate by asking questions or leaving comments. And so this allows you to think critically and engage specifically with other students presenting. And even if you're not ready to present this year, you can attend and support other students and learn about some amazing research. So you will watch videos and then comment or ask questions. And the GoReact platform provides us with the unique opportunity to have a quantitative analysis of how many comments you've left, how many presentations you've watched, and how long those comments are. And so we can use a variety of metrics. So this is really excellent because it supports the community of researchers, and it's a fun way to see the other research that's going on. And getting awards is always fun. So here we have, some examples. Generally for electronic delivery, we tend to focus on gift cards, and then you can buy whatever you want with them. All right. So the recognition, also everyone who presents receives a certificate signed by the chancellors, and these can be sent either by mail or as a PDF. And of course, the other recognition is putting it on your CV or resume. So you can go to the Undergraduate Research Center website and find a lot of information about conference presentation, writing an abstract, other videos. And so we hope this will be a valuable resource. So what I've done so far is give you a very quick overview about the URC, the Undergraduate Research, Scholarship, and Creative Activities Conference. And I'd like to answer any questions you have about attending or presenting this conference or other conferences specific to your field. If you are interested in learning about types of conferences, we also have resources on our website highlighting some upcoming opportunities related to undergraduate research conferences, as well as ones specific to different disciplines. So I'm happy to answer a few quick questions, and then I want to give a chance for Diana to share her experience attending and presenting conferences. So first I see a question in the chat. Are there any benefits to applying by the priority deadline instead of the final deadline? So in previous years, the reason we established the priority deadline is because we were having more and more students apply. And at some point when we were holding this conference in the ARC, we were going to run out of space and run out of poster boards. So that is one advantage of the virtual online platform, is we don't really run out of space. So for this year, the priority deadline gives you a good goal to work towards, but if life happens, you have a midterm or other things are going on, it's totally fine to submit by the final deadline. So there's no specific problem that might actually happen by submitting it by the final deadline. It just gives you that, earlier deadline as a goal to work towards this year. Okay, the abstract video, that is hopefully located in the video archives. And when Diana is giving a brief overview, I'll see if I can find that link and I will share it in the chat for everyone. So any additional questions? You'll also have a chance to ask more questions after Diana shares some of her experiences, and we can have a conversation continue then. All right, I will stop sharing so that I can see additional questions and also give Diana a chance. All right, so I do see one other question popped up. Is there a certain time this the pre-recorded presentation shows or available during the, okay, but yeah, that's a great question. So what it does is you post it in advance and it will be available during the full 3 days of the conference. And then what we are thinking of doing this year is actually designating times when we know people will be kind of answering questions in the Q&A live. So right now we were just suggesting people to check in 1 or 2 times a day. And we're thinking of designating either based on alphabets or disciplines, like a 1-hour time period where if someone wants to leave a question, they know that you'll be there to answer it right away. And so that's something we're considering. But generally, we keep it open so that it's flexible for different people to view at different times. And that way you get the maximum number of viewers and comments and also insight regarding your research. So you don't have to be available to answer them directly, but you would just check in occasionally to see if there's any questions or discussion that you want to contribute to. Great. Yeah, thanks for that question. All right, great. We'll continue asking questions. Diana, I'm going to hand it over to you to share some of your experience as a student presenter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Franz, and thank you for that very informative presentation. Actually, last year was my first year presenting at the research conference at Davis. And I was a bit disappointed, I'm going to be honest, because it was my first year and I really wanted it to be in person, but circumstances were as they were. And I had to present online. However, this really gave me the opportunity to challenge myself as not only as a researcher, but as a student, as a writer, to learn how to adapt better to new circumstances. So it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I was still able to communicate my research. I was still able to present it. So I did feel very fortunate. I was still able to engage with, the scientific community. I was still able to engage with other researchers on campus. So I did appreciate that the university went ahead and found an opportunity so that we could continue and have the conference, even if it was remotely.
Yeah, I know for anyone who has been to the conference, it does kind of feel like a big energetic party. And it's like you've got 1 hour and it's like speed conference where you see as many posters as possible. So while I really missed that energy, I have to say I saw more research and more posters and presentations last year because I was able to, like, at 11 o'clock at night, watch a few extra presentations. Whereas during the conference itself, I could never see as many as I wanted. So there are definitely advantages and disadvantages. And Diana, are you thinking about presenting at conferences in the future to have that hopefully real in-person opportunity?
Yeah, so I'm presenting again this year at the conference. And I presented at several virtual conferences. Because of my experience at the conference last year, I presented at several virtual conferences the past fall quarter, 3 of them actually. And I had an amazing time. It was so rewarding. And I just felt so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to network and meet people from across the country, even if I wasn't able to physically be, for us to physically be there in the same location. So I really am happy that I did attend the conference last year.
Great. Good. And one thing I do want to point out is I did talk to some students that shared specifically that because they got to record or had to record their presentation, it allowed them to get that extra practice and find something that they felt confident in. And so the presentations were really quite good because I think it allowed people to, pick the recording that they liked. And they're not that long. So you can, if it's a 5 to 10 minute presentation, you can practice, 5 to 10 times in an hour and pick the one that works best. Or you can practice over different times. Some people recorded themselves, sent it to their family or their research advisor to get feedback. And so that recording, I think, actually does almost force students to develop more skills because you can get that feedback or give yourself feedback by watching it. So I was super impressed with the presentations.
Definitely. I did send several drafts of my recording to my my PI. So I did go through several drafts of that. And then on that end, I think another really good aspect of having this virtual conference is students get more time to think about the comments before questions before they go ahead and answer. I really liked that. I had more time to come up with a full answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I noticed that when people were asking questions, sometimes if there's like that 1 minute at the end of the talk, people don't feel comfortable to ask the one question or come up with a really good question on short notice. So I think for the attendees and moderators, they were able to ask better questions or, have time to come up with a question that was more meaningful. So it does have those benefits. And, I think, in the future, it's like, how do we capture some of that while still having the in-person will be a good challenge. Good. I'm glad to see that there's a question in the chat about that opportunity. So I'm glad that came up. Great. So what other questions do you guys have about either the logistics of presenting? Okay. Did you get to engage with a lot of people about your research, and did it feel extra time consuming replying to those comments?
So. No, it did not feel extra time consuming. I didn't have to write I didn't feel like I was writing an essay.
Yeah, I would say that there is definitely a good number of comments, but it's not, you don't have to feel like you're taking a test. And a lot of it is just people saying like, oh my gosh, great presentation, or I really, a lot of it's comments instead of questions. And then the questions are sometimes things that help you realize what an expert you are, because someone will say like, oh, did you try this? And so in some cases you might want to double check your answer, but in other cases you're like, oh cool, I already know the answer to that because I did the research myself, right? So a lot of students, they realize how much they have become an expert in their field. And there's also no, if you are totally busy, you can present and only have a little bit of comments, or just say thank you for your comment, or I'll get back to you. It's also a lot of the benefit comes from everything up to the presentation. So if you don't actually have time on those particular days to give as many answers as you want, that's still okay.
So GoReact allows you to leave comments at specific points in time of the recording. So people can tag at minute 2.05, 2.5 seconds, and ask a specific question there, which I found really nice.
Yeah, and actually, Diana, we had the option for students to go in and download the comments. Did you download your comments and questions?
I did. My PI wanted to see them.
Yeah. Every time my students presented at a conference, I always say like, what did people ask you? And sometimes they'll be like, I tried to write it down, So this actually also provides a great documentation. You can go in and basically download your questions and answers in the little chat. So you have a record of that. So you can either learn and think about it more, or discuss it with your graduate student mentor or your faculty mentor. Okay, Diana, do you see that question? Do you want to answer it?
Yeah. So something that I learned is that I definitely need to sit down and do my recording all in one take and look at a script, because what I did was I would record a little piece of my script, and then I would download it and mess with that, and then record the second little piece of my script. So it all sounded, it was fine. The information was cohesive, but it sounded like it was different volumes and it sounded weird. Do you know what I mean? The pitch was strange.
Mm. Yeah.
I would like to make it more professional next time. That is what I learned.
Okay. Great. Well, that's one advantage of being able to present again this year. Yeah. And I think it's also what you're saying. I know why you probably recorded it individually at first, but by recording it all at once, you'll also kind of mimic that practice of having to give a full presentation.
Yeah.
And so that's a good challenge for yourself. And yeah, that's a really good thing you noted, though, is the fact that what's unique when you're doing a video recording, you can read a script. You would never normally stand up and like read during your presentation, but you can have notes. You can have that extra boost of confidence from reading something if you want. And sometimes in the process of practicing and reading it, you realize how much you actually know the information, and then you end up feeling more comfortable just doing it without the script. I actually gave my first presentation at a national meeting, an American Chemical Society meeting when I was a grad student. I still remember the first sentence I said because I practiced that so much to make sure that no matter how nervous I was, I could get through that. And then I hoped I would just kick into autopilot and be able to do the rest. And so, yeah. So in all cases, that's a good advice is like, don't memorize it, but if you feel confident getting yourself started, and then after that, it kind of comes more naturally.
I remember my first in-person conference, I was shaking, like I was so scared. Not because of I wasn't confident enough in my myself. I was speaking to scientists about my research for the first time. I was so scared.
Yeah. Great. And there's an adding to Jessica's question was, what was some of the feedback you received on your presentation, Diana?
Some of the feedback I received, people said that they liked the fact that I utilized the video tool, and I was able to add the aspect of, so I work with auditory research, and we test tones in order to identify the neural activity in the auditory cortex. So I was able to play different tones that we test. In a normal conference, I would not be able to grab my phone and be like, hey, here are the tones that we play. So people commented that that really helped them visualize what the tests would really look like.
Yeah, that's great. I actually remember that. And there was this few students that had some really great multimedia, either opportunities to show a video of an animal doing something, or an exercise experiment, or a graph, or, like, so think of it definitely as more multimedia. And another advantage is also in thinking about how, if you have any video editing skills, you can, make this like very polished presentation that stands out really well when it's kind of online content. So I've seen a few students do that. And, maybe it's because I have no editing skills when it comes to videos that I get really impressed. But definitely that can be a good chance. All right. So I see two questions, and these are great questions. Yeah, so obviously one of the challenges this year is that no one has been able to be in lab as much, or be able to get as much research done as they wanted. Even if you were able to go into lab, we're all juggling so many different things, and we've got childcare or family to take care of, and so first of all, don't stress about that. And I would say that means it's even a better opportunity to present at the undergraduate research conference at UC Davis, because remember that kind of mission I stated about how this is an affirming and transformative environment. The goal is not, you're not there because you want to be the best presentation, right? You're there because you're building skills and you're showcasing your research with other undergraduate students who we all went through the same, we are all currently going through the same pandemic. So one of the main reasons that I love to encourage students to present at any conference, but especially the Undergraduate Research Scholarship and Creative Activities Conference at UC Davis, is because it is the perfect time to get a better grasp on your research. The act of preparing slides and thinking about what do you want to present, how do you want to present it, and practicing it, or getting feedback from your mentors provides you with a learning experience to learn more about your research. So we often get questions from students who say, oh, my project isn't done yet. Well, it's actually the best time to present your research is when it's not done. Even if you're just starting your project, you can explain the goals of your research, the methods that you're going to use. And ideally, if you have preliminary results, you can mention that. If you happen to have more than preliminary results, that's great. So it can be a really good, like, a stepping stone, let's say, to the next phase of your research. Those questions, that feedback might give you insight about a way to boost your research to the next level. Yeah, so that ties into both of those questions. Certainly, even if you haven't completed your project yet, you can talk about your goals, and that can give you new perspective and build those skills to make you a better researcher along the way. And Diana, you presented your project wasn't done and you're still working on the project. So you want to comment about your experience?
Yeah, I've presented my project midway through, quarters of the way through at several different conferences, and it was successful. It's not necessarily about where your project is, it's about that process of communicating where you are, what you're doing, where you want to take that project. It's just about the process of science, of research. It's not necessarily about, completing the project. Don't feel pressured like you have to have that deadline in mind necessarily.
Yeah, so by the fact that it's not until April means you have time to prepare. And you can think that you might have some results and not have as many, or you might get more results than you realize. So it's a very kind of safe, affirming, developmental conference where you can think about you are developing your skills, celebrating research, and everyone who attends that conference is very aware that we've been in a pandemic and that not everyone has had the chance to do as much as they wanted. And so anything that you've done, whether it's just thinking about your project or actually being able to develop parts of it, will be exciting to be able to share that with the UC Davis community. Yeah, actually, that's one of my I guess concerns is that everyone will be like, oh, my project's not done, I don't want to present, because I know there's a lot of students who are involved, and we hope that the conference and using the online platform allows this to still be an opportunity, and students won't feel like they have to be done with their project in order to present. Yeah, okay, so there's a great question here. If your project, depending on your different project, you might have graphs or visuals. Yeah, so there are some different projects and presentations. We actually have, and I'll throw a link in, we have the Research Rockstars, which does feature a certain amount of science, but it has some non-scientists and some examples. So you could show images related to history. There's projects that had to do with newspaper articles and history. There were some projects where people did it more as a spoken word presentation, where they were kind of presenting an idea and it was just them. There was no slides of any kind. It was just them presenting and discussing. I think visuals are something to always consider. So whether it's a history, psychology, art, having at least one visual can be impactful. But you definitely don't have to have graphs. You don't have to have multimedia. If you do have some of that, or maybe you have a video clip that relates to your project in a history aspect, then that might be relevant. So we don't have all the presentations from before, but we will see if we can get approval from a few people to highlight some of the differences. So that's a great suggestion. Thanks for that question. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's a good question too. Yeah, the abstract submitted is final, because we immediately, the way it goes into the registration system is we use that to make the abstract book. So we generally don't have you submit one and then update it, because especially when we have 500 or 700 or 900 students, there's just too many students for that to work. If there are if there's an error in terms of how it's interpreted by the registration system, those are all fixed. We do some formatting after we accept the abstract, but generally the one that you submit will be the one that's posted in the abstract book and posted online. So that's why you want to make sure you have a research mentor or someone also read over it and give you some feedback to make sure it's a final version and that it doesn't have any typos. And it's okay if you say you are going to try to do an experiment or try to do an analysis that you don't have completed in time, that's fine. You can also change the wording a little bit. If you're not sure, you can have a sentence that says, this research will also describe an analysis related to this or experiments related to this. So you could either be describing the experiments that you're going to do or describing the experiments that you just did right before the conference. Yeah. Oh, yeah, thanks. I'll go back to that. All right. Yeah. So, this is a great question. Is it more challenging to network in an online conference versus an in-person conference? The answer is both yes and no. And then I'll let Diana also answer this. So in an online conference, it is challenging because you don't see the person and, it's sometimes there is a networking event that is scheduled. But when I've gone to networking events, there's sometimes so many people. And sometimes if someone sees someone they already know, it's hard for you to network with that person if they're already networking with someone else. So in some cases, it can be more challenging because you don't get the chance to maybe accidentally bump into someone. But what I have seen for a lot of events, when there is a networking session planned, a lot of people don't necessarily go to the networking sessions. So I happen to be the chair of the Division of Organic Chemistry, the largest technical division for the American Chemical Society with over 10,000 members in the technical division, not to mention the entire American Chemical Society. So when we did a networking session at the national conference, there was like 15 people there, 12 people there. And it was like people from Merck and Genentech who are also on the executive committee with me, Bristol Myers Squibb, myself, 2 other professors. So there's like 10 professionals waiting there to network. And then like 5 students showed up. So for those 5 students, it was the most amazing networking ever. And I joined LinkedIn with all of them. So if you choose to proactively go to a networking event, you will probably be one of the few people there and you will have some great networking opportunities that you might not have normally had. So it is a little bit harder to make it happen, but when you find that opportunity or when you take advantage of it, you're actually going to get better networking out of it. So it's kind of a yes and no depending on certain things. And if you are proactive and make the most of it, it will be a tremendous networking opportunity. And I saw Diana nodding her head. So do you want to share any thoughts there also?
Yeah, so I went to Cosign, which gives travel awards to some undergrads, but undergrads don't present. It's purely a networking opportunity and opportunity for undergrads to get exposure. So I got a chance to meet a lot of amazing people, researchers from other continents. Who had traveled to America for this conference. And I was invited to attend a meeting, a networking lunch. And at first I didn't want to go because I knew I was going to be like one of the only undergrads there with like a bunch of 50 and 30-year-olds. And it ended up being like a really rewarding experience. I did feel kind of strange at first with them finding out that I was an undergrad, but they were actually really impressed. So my advice to you is put yourself out there, okay? If you don't try, then you're not going to get anything out of the experience. And that's kind of been my experience with networking. It's a little awkward when you first start out, but you have to try. And there are some conferences that are specifically for networking. So like there's a pre-med conference, the National Hispanic Pre-Medical Association conference that's specifically for networking. So that provides a lot of amazing resources for students. So yeah.
Yeah. So one way I like to think about it is, everyone right now is living through a pandemic. So things don't necessarily, it's not like you're going to fall backwards. But if you do have the option to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are out there right now, it can be key in potentially like giving you that opportunity to meet someone that you might not have met. Because right now, time and space is a little bit weird during a pandemic. So you can network with people all around the world in a way that you wouldn't have had that option to before. And everyone's a little more receptive to it because of the fact that we're kind of living on Zoom half the time. So yeah, and I'm happy to come back to that topic. I do want to answer a few of these abstract ones too, but okay. So getting back to the abstract. So the question was, just to clarify, you can put preliminary results in your abstract and you can present on final results. You can also say you want to get final results and not have them yet, and that's okay. So no one's going to come back to you and say, you said you were going to do 4 experiments and I only see 3 experiments, right? So it's very flexible. You can write optimistically in your abstract that you're going to evaluate 10 substrates or perform 6 experiments or analyze 12 archival documents. And even if you only get halfway through, that's fine, right? So no one's going to really check back. The abstract is really practice for you to develop writing skills, and then for someone to read the abstract and be enticed to come see your poster and your presentation. So really, it's a little mini advertisement to say, hey, come check out my work and see what I've been doing. The other question related to that, so how long do you recommend students spend on the abstract? So I'm a big fan of time budgets. I think that for myself and for many people, we get anxious. We feel the perfectionist coming on, like I have to be perfect. So someone knows that I'm presenting to my professors. They have to think I know everything. And then we spend way too much time on things, right? So time budgets can be very valuable. So for an abstract, if you set a time budget, I am going to spend 1 hour writing the abstract, and then I'm going to give it to my graduate mentor, my faculty mentor, and ask for feedback, right? Or I'm going to spend 1 hour and give it to my roommate just to make sure there's no typos, right? So set an amount of time and then get some feedback. And just communicate clearly, this is my first draft or this is my 0 draft. I just want to get your quick feedback. And then you'll get back that feedback, and then you can spend like 1 more hour. So in theory, you should be able to write an abstract in a fairly short amount of time. And if you spend too much time on it, it means that you are probably stressing yourself out more than needed and having legitimate concerns of imposter syndrome that you want to strive to overcome. And it's okay when you're a researcher trying to strive to that next level. Of course, like, oh, I'm not ready to present. I don't have as much results as someone else. It's easy to tell ourselves that. So that's why a time budget kind of gives us a realistic time frame to work within. So that's my recommendation, is to figure out what's reasonable. An abstract is usually something like 5 to 8 sentences. So it's really one of the most perfect writing assignments ever because it's not very long. You can easily give it to someone, get feedback, and then give it to somebody else. And as a faculty mentor, I'm happy to give feedback to students because I can read it really quickly. Whereas if someone gives me a 15-page document, I have to set aside a long enough amount of time, and it just takes more effort, and you have to make sure you're planning for that. But an abstract is really great, and it's the brevity, the communication is all things that you're practicing. So Diana, do you remember how much time you spent on writing your abstract?
For this conference, it was 45 minutes, but for last year's conference, it was way too long because I was stressing about it.
All right, great. And I'm going to actually copy in here my quick little guide to what a research abstract should include. And so essentially, you want to start by thinking about your title, and it should be declarative. So instead of saying, studies for something, you want to say something like declaring maybe what your result or your method, or you want to try to do it as a declaration or as a question. A question can also intrigue people. Think about the keywords and phrases that you want to include. So maybe you're not ready to write your abstract yet. Give yourself a 15-minute time budget or even a 5-minute time budget where you just write down 10 keywords or phrases that you want to make sure show up in your abstract, right? Or you can brainstorm 2 or 3 titles just in the 5 minutes that you have. So that's a perfect example where a time budget works really well. And then you want to make sure that you have a sentence that defines the purpose or significance of the research problem and motivation, like why is this important? You also want to indicate methods. So are you analyzing archival literature? Are you interviewing people? Are you synthesizing molecules? Are you synthesizing in lab, or are you studying computationally? Right. So those types of methods are important. That doesn't mean you want to go step by step. First, I did this and then I did this. It's more of just what type of method are you using? And then you want to talk about potentially the key findings or results. And if it's in progress, that's fine. Conclusions, if it's in progress, that's fine. You may not have conclusions yet, or you may have preliminary conclusions. And I emphasize that. And then you also at the very end want to kind of connect back to the significance. I'm also now going to copy the best resource ever when it comes to writing abstracts. So I will go to our conference page. So this is the link that will take you to the abstract. So on the Undergraduate Research Center page is all of the abstract books since 2011. So almost 10 years worth. So you can go and look in there for an example of an abstract that if your research area is history, you can look up an abstract related to history. If it's related to video games or archival research or neurobiology or chemistry, you can see examples of different research abstracts to kind of be a model, a template, or a guide. So based on the overview I just gave here and also what's in those abstract books, there are literally thousands of examples of abstracts, and they're all for undergraduate students who probably weren't finished with their projects. Their projects were all in progress and not done yet. So they're perfect examples for whatever situation you're in.
One thing that I want to add is something that I found really useful about attending lots of different conferences is some abstracts, depending on the type of conference you go to, will be directed towards a different type of audience. Some audiences will be completely science-based, just neuroscientists, just audiologists. Some abstracts will be like our research conference where you have historians and maybe theater majors and other people, staff members from campus who want to just view what you're doing. So being able to have the tools to navigate communicating between those different types of audiences well is really important.
Yeah, great. Thank you for emphasizing that, Diana. That's one of the cool powers of an abstract, is being able to write an abstract for a general audience versus a more technical audience. Each one of those has its benefits. And for this conference, you can focus on the more general, but you don't have to. So when you look through, for example, the chemistry abstracts, some of the chemistry abstracts, a student might have written it because they were going to present at the UC Davis conference and also at the ACS conference. And so you'll see something that's pretty technical, and that's because they knew there was a lot of chemistry faculty and chemistry students, and that honestly, there were more chemists probably than historians. But your first sentence should hopefully be something that everyone can appreciate, so that they have some semblance of what you're working on. But you can make that decision, especially working with your advisor, if you want to have it be an abstract that's appropriate and the professional practice for a national conference in your discipline, or if you want to use this as an opportunity to practice communicating to a broader audience. So you'll see both of those types of examples in the abstract books. But I think most of them tend to be a little bit more on the discipline specific side, just because that's great practice for you as a researcher. But it's not a requirement. Yeah. Great. Well, these have been some really great questions. Hopefully this has been valuable. We have a few more minutes, but for people who have to head out, I want to thank you. We will be posting this recording and it will be available. So it'll be under the video library and it'll probably be highlighted somewhere on our conference website in case people are looking for it there. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And then if anyone has any questions that they want to ask verbally or come up with after that, or more specific questions, I'm happy to stick around.